One of the more interesting options in terms of programs for adding a start menu into Windows 8 is the commercial program Start8, which is made by a company called Start8. Although it isn't free like a program such as Classic Shell, which provides similar functionality, at $4.99, current price anyway, it's still a pretty reasonable deal. And for that money you do get a much simpler interface, albeit one that isn't quite as customizable. In this video we're going to take a look at how to install Start8, a really simple process, as well as how to configure it to essentially get a Windows 7 style start menu. I've already downloaded Start8, so I'll go ahead and run through the setup real quickly. Agree to the license terms. Select the installation location. In this case it's going to want to install to program files x86, meaning it's a 32-bit program. Now, in a lot of cases you may need to consider whether you want to install to that default Windows installation location, simply because you can run into problems with versions from Vista onward at least, with programs not running correctly or not being able to set your settings up correctly if you install to these default locations, program files and program files x86. However, in this case I've seen that there aren't any problems. I've already installed it previously, so I'm not going to worry about that. Click Finish. And here we are at the configuration screen. Since the point of this video is to look at adding a Windows 7 style start menu to your Windows 8, what we're going to do is stick with the Windows 7 style, and then we have options of themes. This essentially has to do with how much you want the appearance, the overall aesthetics, to be like Windows 7 versus Windows 8. In Windows 8 you have more square corners, more plain boxes, so that's what the default theme pretty much keeps completely. Now on top of that we have the options for what the start button will look like, and essentially here we have the flag, which is the Windows logo, or we have Start8, which is the Start8 program logo. We're going to go ahead and look at the three basic options here for theme and take a look at the start buttons while we're at it. So let's start with the flag and the default theme, and we'll go ahead and close this. So as you can see here, what we've got is a basic Windows 7 style start menu, but with completely square corners, no rounded edges, anything like that. Let's go ahead and go back to our settings. Okay, so we'll click on all programs. We'll go to Start8, because that's the vendor of the software, and then we will go to Start8. And then we'll go to the rounded theme and go ahead and look at the Start8 start button. Now you can see we've got this new style of start button with the Start8 logo instead. We have essentially the same type of start menu styling wise, except that now we have some rounded corners, a little bit smoother appearance. Let's go ahead and go back into our configuration one more time and go all the way to the Windows 7 theme. And I'm going to go back to my flag start menu because I just sort of prefer that. Okay. So now you can see the appearance is very different. We have gradient shading on the start menu here. Functionally it's essentially the same. And notice too that we have the Windows 8 menu shortcut up at the top, which will take us to our start screen. That's basically replacing the functionality of getting to the start screen by using this hotspot down in the corner of the screen. Go ahead and bring up our configuration one more time here. So now I'm going to go ahead and use my personal preferences here. I'm going with the default theme, at least for the moment. I'm going to stick with my flag style start button. And then let's go to the configuration options, this configure item on the side here. And basically what you have here is a bunch of standard Windows configuration options. These have, for the last couple of versions of Windows, some of them even longer, been standard items that you can configure on the Start menu. Mostly what I'm going to be looking at here is just trying to show you some options that you can use that I think a lot of people either don't know about or haven't really considered. The big thing here is we have our list of recently used applications, which I certainly take advantage of. However, I tend to not use large icons on the Start menu. And the reason for that is because I like to have a lot of programs showing up here. I use a lot of recent programs on my list because I use a lot of different programs. So I like to have them show up on that list. I increase the number of programs in the recently used programs list and set it to use smaller icons so that I can fit that list on there easily. That's really a personal preference thing, and honestly, if you don't use a lot of programs, or if you don't use that list at all, there isn't a lot of advantage to doing this. We have options to show or not show the administrative tools. These are a lot of settings in Windows. But here's one thing that I think a lot more people might want to take advantage of that I think most people really aren't aware of. There are certain items on the Start menu that open up a new window, such as the computer link. So you have the computer item on the Start menu. Let's go ahead and look at that real quick. This computer item here, as long as we have it set to show as a link, it opens up a whole new window that has your computer items in it, your drives, your folders, all that. But instead, what you can do, if you know that most of the time when you open that up, you're going to have to dig down into a different folder, or if you're just looking for a document or a particular file that you know is there, you can instead show it as a menu. So now as a menu, we have this arrow here, and you can actually dig right down into your folders, and you can see what's inside them. Now the downside to this is, in order to open one of those folders, you have to right-click, use the context menu, and then select Open. For a lot of people, having that shown as a menu perhaps isn't a big deal. Something else that's probably a bigger deal, or more useful to more people anyway, is to show the control panel as a menu. So once again, let's go ahead and go to our showing it as a link. This is the default setting, actually. And once we go over here to control panel, we have this window that opens up. You may have this list view. You may have this category view. But instead of seeing that, if you show it as a menu, now you have this list of different control panel applets, or control panels, depending on how you refer to it, and you can select the specific area of settings you want to look at. Other items that show up there, devices and printers. Now you'll notice that some of these can only be shown as a link. Some of them can be shown as both. Some of them can only be shown as a submenu. I'm actually going to get rid of favorites because I don't need to open them up from the Start menu. I don't use the documents on the Start menu. Help and support, that's definitely something I like to have there, even though I don't use it very often. One last thing I want to look at here, though, is the run command. Now by default, it's going to not be shown. The run command is the little dialog that comes up. You can type in just the actual program that you want to run. Sometimes you have to put in a path to it. Sometimes you have to put in just the name of the executable program. But the nice thing about the run command is it actually allows you to do some things that normally you would have to go and open up a command prompt and run a command from there. Instead, you can just get this handy dialog. And let's go ahead and look at what that is in case you're not familiar with it. And you can run a command like editing the registry in this case directly from this little dialog. Not everybody needs it. Not everybody will use it. That's one of those personal preference things. So now with all that stuff set, let's go ahead and go to the control area, the last little area we're going to look at here, but by far not the least. In this area of the configuration, you have some options for how various controls, whether they be keys on your keyboard or the start button itself, or even the hotspots in the corners of Windows, work with Start8 or with the Windows Start screen. So let's start up at the top. These are desktop UI specific options. In other words, this is your desktop UI, the traditional Windows UI. So the top one has to do with the Start button. When you click the Start button down in the lower left corner, by default it's going to show the Start8 Start menu, or you can set it so that it shows the Windows Start screen. That's what's being referred to here as the Windows 8 menu. So let's go ahead and select that just to show you exactly how that works. Now normally you would have a little hotspot down here, the hot corner as they call it, and that would show you a little icon of the Start screen, and then you could click that to switch. In this case, you can do the same thing with the Start button. Now if you don't like that, and if you're trying to get your configuration back, you can also right click here and configure Start8. And I'm going to go ahead and have it use the Start menu instead. The next thing is for the Windows key on your keyboard. So you should have, assuming you don't have an ancient keyboard, you will almost certainly have one or more keys on your keyboard that have a little Windows flag logo on them and probably say Start. Now if you press that key on your keyboard in older versions of Windows, the Start menu automatically pops up. Or there are various other keyboard shortcuts you can use, the Windows key plus something else. Now in Start8, that Start menu popping up behavior is the default again, or you could configure it so that the Windows key shows the Start screen instead. So maybe you want the Start button to show you the Start menu and the Windows key to show you the Start screen. Or maybe you want it to show the last Modern UI application, Modern UI being that tablet interface that the Start screen is part of that used to be known as the Metro UI. But I'm going to go ahead and leave mine to open up the Start menu. And the reason why is because there's this other option. Instead, I can hold down the Control key on my keyboard, Control clicking, and click the Start button. So instead of using the Windows key to get to the Windows 8 Start screen, I can Control click the Start button. Now if you happen to have two Windows keys on your keyboard, one on the left and one on the right, you can also set it up so that the Start screen will appear when you press the right Windows key, and still leave it so that the Start menu shows up when you press the left key. And then moving down this section of configuration options, we have a couple options for when you are in the Modern UI only. So the Windows key, once again that key on your keyboard, you can set it to show the Windows 8 Start screen when you press that key, to fade to the desktop and show the Start menu. In other words, it still opens the Start menu, which of course requires that you go to the desktop UI, or you can just have it switch back to the desktop. I'm going to go ahead and leave that so it shows the Windows 8 menu or Start screen. A lot of the reason why you might pick one over the other is going to have to do with how you use Windows. So that may be something that you set one way, for example, always going to the desktop when you start out, but if you find yourself using more modern UI applications, you can always change it. And then we have the Start Menu hot corner. Now the hot corner is what appears down here when you move your mouse pointer into that corner. So you can have it show the Start8 menu. Once again, this is when you are in a Modern UI or Metro UI app. You can have it show you the Start8 menu or the Windows 8 start screen. Now, the funny thing about this option is, it sounds interesting in theory, but first of all, I'm not sure exactly how you would have it show you the Start8 menu, although perhaps that means going to the desktop. But more importantly, I've tried this and it doesn't seem to do anything. So let's say, for example, I have it show the Start8 menu. So I go ahead and switch to my Modern UI. So I have my Google app here. This is the start screen hotspot, but you'll notice the Windows 8 start screen icon shows up there. So I'm not actually sure if it just doesn't work, if it doesn't mean what it sounds like it means. For whatever reason, I don't even mess with it. I just set it to go to the Windows 8 start screen. So the last set of options we're going to look at here have to do with Windows 8 specific features, and specifically Windows 8 features which are really oriented around tablet usage and the new Modern UI. So normally by default, when you log into Windows, you're going to see the start screen. So even if you use nothing but a desktop or laptop computer, even if you only use the desktop interface, you're going to start on the start screen. By default, that's going to be disabled. So what's going to happen is you log into Windows and it goes to your desktop just like previous versions of Windows. If you'd prefer to go ahead and go to the start screen, you can always uncheck that. For example, maybe you have a hybrid machine, so it's a tablet and a laptop, and maybe you prefer to go to the tablet UI, and you can always pick the desktop if you are using it docked to the keyboard. Even then though, if you're on the desktop, by default you still have some, well, to put it bluntly, tablet features enabled. So let's say, for example, you move your mouse pointer to the top or bottom right corner of your screen, you get this charms bar over here. Or if you move it up to the left, you're going to see the last app, or if you were on the start screen it would be the desktop, but in this case, speaking specifically about on the desktop, you're going to see the last app that you've run. And you're going to see sort of the tablet equivalent of the old task manager if you drag your mouse down further. Or if you go down to this corner, if you didn't have the start button here, you would actually see this start icon. In this case, because we have the start button enabled with Start8, that disappears entirely. Now, maybe that doesn't bother you, maybe you actually like that. But if you want to get rid of that entire interface, in other words, get rid of your hot corners entirely, you can do that right here. Or you can disable just the top left corner, so that app switching hot corner, or of course just the charms bar. So you don't come over here and accidentally, when you move your mouse over there, enable the charms bar. I'm going to go ahead and disable all of it. And so basically now we've gone through all the configuration options you probably need to look at to set up an old Windows 7 style start menu and general Windows interface for the desktop in Windows 8 using Start8.